Well, hello there, all you magnificent people, and welcome back to the fourth part of the guided tour around the island here in Ark Survival Evolved. My name is Will, and this is an Ecologist Plays, the channel where we are learning more about nature by playing games. Now, of course, we are just flying around on our Argentavis Flame Crest over here, because it is going to be the safest thing to be flying around the island, or this part of the island. And we are right here, up at the top, as we are flying around Carnivore Island, and probably one of the highest concentrations of predators around on the entire map. And we are starting out, of course, with a Carnotaurus and a Pulmonoscorpius as well. So we're just going to sit over here. We'll be nice and safe, and should be at least relatively safe. There is another Megalodon right at the top there, but we are not going to be worrying about it too much. For now, let's just keep an eye on the Abelisaurid over there, Carnotaurus. Of course, the Abelisaurids are very renowned for their tiny little arms, and the Carnotaurus is not the only dinosaur that had those. The whole group are characterized by those tiny arms. Of course, Carnotaurus have got those long horns on the top there, and it's not exactly sure what on earth they use that for, but we'll get back to Carnotaurus again in a moment. So they are kind of doing their own thing. For now, let's just have a look here at the Pulmonoscorpius again. So we did last time actually have a good look at one, and I've in the meantime actually captured one, and we do now have one with us. But notice that this one here, notice the pincers and the tail. And a very quick and easy way to more or less figure out whether a scorpion that you're looking at is highly venomous or not is by actually to look at the thickness of the pincers relative to the thickness of the tail, because some of your species of scorpions will obviously depend on their venom to paralyze and incapacitate their prey, and those will have thick tails with a nice big venom gland at the tip there, and then thinner pincers, because the pincers are just there to quickly grip it while they deliver a very potent venomous sting. But some of your scorpion species will depend on crushing their prey with their pincers and then delivering a very weak venom. And those will have very thin tails and very thick pincers to crush and incapacitate their prey. So the Pulmonoscorpius we've got around here will be a moderately venomous one. It's got relatively thinnish pincers and a moderately thick tail, so it is somewhere in between. But we have got the Abelisaurid, the Carnotaurus, another one walking around over here. As I was mentioning, they of course are characterized by those two horns at the top of their head, which give them their name, which means meat-eating bull or carnivorous bull. Taurus, of course, being bull. And so the entire Abelisaurid group were characterized by those tiny little arms, but none of the other ones had those horns above their eyes. Compsognathus on Madagascar did seem to have a bit of a bump on the top of their head. I think Rajasaurus perhaps as well, but there were a whole suite of these Abelisaurid, but none of them had the two horns sticking out. And with Carnotaurus, as I've mentioned in one of the previous episodes, and link up at the top there, they are known from only one specimen. Only one fossil has ever been found of them, and that was an extremely well-preserved one, which even had skin imprints fossilized. And with the skin imprints, we now know that they had a whole bunch of little bumps all along their skin there, along their flanks, but it wasn't in neat symmetrical rows. Instead, those little bumps were kind of scattered across the skin of the Abelisaurids. And now in the most recent season of Prehistoric Planet, there is of course a lot of the Abelisaurids that were also present in the show there, and there they have now shown those scattered scales all along their bodies. In the water here, there we go, I was just about to say, we have got a Megalodon, and we also had a Pelagornis there. The Pelagornis was being attacked by the Megalodon there. And now we're just going to quickly fly around here. Of course, we should be able to see, there's the Megalodon again, as we had in the previous episode, just kind of cruising along the surface here, and it seems to most likely be looking for something to eat along the surface, and it had almost caught that Pelagornis. Now, off the coast of many islands where you have got things like albatrosses and gannets and terns and so breeding, you have a lot of different sharks, especially tiger sharks, actually hanging around the edge of the islands, waiting during the fledging period. So when the seabirds have all their babies learning to fly, they will start on the beaches and then take off, and they will fly a short distance and then kind of plop down in the water, and that's what these sharks are waiting for. They are waiting for the seabirds to actually chill on the surface so that they can actually try and grab them, which is what this Megalodon seems to have been doing, waiting for the Pelagornis to just take a nice little break on the surface and then trying to bite them to try and get a nice little meal. And with the tiger sharks in particular that go for the seabirds, that's actually the best time, I believe, to go for those little ones, because these chicks have been fed by their parents. They're nice and fat, very nutrient dense little packages, food packages chilling on the surface of the water. And so yeah, oh, there is a, oh, that's a big T-Rex. That is an alpha T-Rex. Yeah, I am not going to be messing with that one. I am, however, just going to turn around so that we can have a good look at it. So it must be mentioned that yes, we do have two T-Rexes there, and that is a male alpha T-Rex, yes, which we are not going to be messing with, as I've mentioned. But when it comes to fossils, one should keep in mind that the odds of the largest specimen of any species actually fossilizing is really, really small. Most likely what we are seeing is a random sample of size groups that fossilize. So we are going to get some tiny individuals fossilizing of the same species, and we are probably going to get some larger specimens of the species fossilizing as well. But the odds are really against the smallest individual and the largest individual actually fossilizing, because the odds of a fossil forming in the first place is so small that you really have very few individuals actually fossilizing. And so the odds of those few specimens then actually being the smallest and largest, really small. So yes, it is possible that for a lot of the species like T-Rex and Carnotaurus and raptors, as we have on the island here, you may actually have had specimens that are larger than the recorded range of fossils for those different species. And so I like to view that these alpha rexes and alpha raptors and alpha carnotauruses that we've got, which is missing at the moment, and there is a little Megalodon just kind of doing a reverse jump. It's just doing a headstand. Not very smart, that one. There we go, finally figuring out how to go back to being a shark. Anyway, I like to think that these alpha creatures that we can see on the island sometimes are actually just exceptionally large specimens. And that's why they are so big and potentially quite dangerous. Oh, there we go, another Megalodon attacking a seabird, a Pelagornis, that is chilling on the water surface. Try to take a little bite there. Very similar, as I've mentioned. There we go, and going back. Oh, there we go, took a nice little chunk out of that Pelagornis, but the Pelagornis is still alive, able to make its escape, as it responded quickly enough, not very quickly, but quickly enough to escape the jaws of the Megalodon. Of course, great white sharks, which, as I've mentioned previously, the Megalodon was actually grouped along with in the same genus, but it is now split. The great white shark, what they will often do, especially when hunting seals, is they will be in deeper water and they look up at the surface of the water, and then when they see the seals moving in an area, they actually rush up and leap clear out of the water. And in doing so, they then kill the seals, and they get a nice little meal in the process. And you can actually see that type of behavior in Prehistoric Planet as well. In the second season, they did bring that in as well. What have we got over here? It is a dead Ichthyosaurus. For a moment, I thought it's an Ichthyosaurus that's actually chilling around, catching its breath, because ichthyosaurs, like all reptiles, are air breathers, so they need to actually get up to the surface to breathe. Although some freshwater terrapins are able to actually breathe through their butts, which is an adaptation for surviving if you have a lake that is very often covered with ice during winter. Some of those reptiles, like some of those turtles or terrapins, well, technically terrapins, but for those of you that know them as turtles, well, turtles, will be able to breathe through their butts. So they're able to actually take in oxygen from the water itself. They do not need to go up to the surface to breathe, which, if a lake is covered by ice, it would of course be impossible to actually get to the surface of the lake to actually take a nice deep breath. So they It's quite amazing that they're able to do that. I mean, I can't imagine sitting in a nice little bubble bath and then just like breathing that way. But anyway, let's say some terrapins are able to do that. But the Ichthyosaurs, of course, they were not able to do that. They most likely did not have the very special adaptations needed to actually be able to do that. So they needed to come up to the surface to gulp some air. And they most likely would have gulped air very quickly in order to just go back to being in their element, which is in slightly deeper water. And there we have another Ichthyosaurus swimming around. Very dolphin-like in the appearance, and there is one coming up to the surface. But it was coming up to the surface. There's another one living in little pods, it seems, here on the island. Very often when you find one, you'll find another one, very much like dolphins. And it is, of course, quite possible that they, like dolphins, would have used group behavior, or would have occurred in groups to actually herd the fish or their prey animals closer together, which then, of course, would have enabled them to catch the prey or the fish more easily. So teamwork really does make the dream work with a lot of these creatures. Even though they may not necessarily have been in very tight-knit groups, it could have been very similar to giraffes, where we have got specimens or individuals which are not in fixed groups, but they very often do occur in... And that's a massive coelacanth, isn't it? No, that's Dunkleosteus. Anyway, we'll have to talk about Dunkleosteus next time, or another time when we actually do a little marine excursion. But as I was mentioning with giraffes, for example, they are not in very tight-knit groups. They actually have got or groups that are very variable in their composition. So an individual may be part of one group today, but next time they actually move tomorrow to another group and another group. They just kind of move around, but they very often seem to cluster around other individuals of their species, even though they don't have a very high group fidelity. In other words, they don't necessarily go back to being in the same group the whole time. It's quite possible that things like ichthyosaurs here would have followed the same type of principle, where they group together to catch the prey, the shoals of fish, but then once that's done, each one just kind of goes their own way, and they may possibly meet up again when they again meet up at a bunch of bait fish, but they may never again actually meet up as well. It is quite possible that they will never again see the other individuals that they had just spent their time hunting with. Now, of course, we have left Carnivore Island behind, which means if the coast is clear, we can actually go back to using our Pteranodon, which I seem to have misplaced. Somewhere, I have lost that Pteranodon again, which means we will simply be flying around with the Flame Crest again. Alright everybody, so I have just come back to Carnivore Island to come and have a look and see if I can find Skeletina, the Pteranodon that we were using, and I could not find her anywhere. And then after way too long, I realized that I have Skeletina in a cryopod in my hotbar down below. Yeah, so that's embarrassing, but at least this Tina is alive. Even though this past week we have lost Tina Turner, Skeletina at least is still alive and well. Okay, so we'll be carrying on flying around with Skeletina henceforth again, because she is a little bit more of a silent flyer. Doesn't constantly call and have these massive flappy wing beats as we go along. I did realize that I forgot to talk about the Argentavis, which of course was present on the island, but we will see Argentavis again as we head up to the mountains in the next episode, I believe. So that will be up next time. For now though, we're just going to quickly switch over and grab Skeletina over here, and we're just going to put Flame Crest back into her pod. Alright, and we're off. And oh my word, this is so slow, but they're just in time as the compy arrives again. Oh my word. Okay, wasn't a compy? It looks so big. That is indeed a compy. There we go. So Compsognathus, of course, the dainty jaw is what it means. Really thin little jaws. They would have reached, I think, about almost knee height for us as humans. So they're quite, well, big. They're about the size of a velociraptor, believe it or not. Velociraptor was around about that size as well. But as I've mentioned before, Compsognathus only really known from 2 specimens. Although there may also be some like fragments that possibly could also have been Compsognathus. Sometimes it's very difficult to know which species you are looking at when you find a toe somewhere. That's like, yeah, or a toe bone actually. You don't even find the entire toe, you just find a toe bone. And yeah, that can be quite frustrating to actually try and figure out what species that belongs to. Of course, we have got a whole bunch of Ichthyosaurus down here again as well, doing what they do best, hanging around the cliff faces here next to the ocean. And they really were extremely abundant along the Western Interior Seaway, which almost split North America in twain. I really wanted to say in twain there. Anyway, so almost split North America in two. And it was a relatively shallow sea that most likely had a superabundance of fish, because you have got Ichthyosaurus, you've got Hesperornis, you've got a whole bunch of marine piscivorous species that were found, fossilized from that area. So quite awesome, and most likely would have hung around the rock faces here, very similar to gulls, would have bred on the rock faces, most likely in little colonies, or loose colonies as well, and they would of course have fed on all the fish in the area, as those ones have just caught a coelacanth down there as well. And there, of course, we see the next area that we will be heading to. We are going to be heading over to the frozen section of the island, but we are going to be doing that next time. So stay tuned, as on Friday we're going to have another little episode, and we will still see what we are recording for that, whether it is Nick and I in Dinkum, or Nick and I in Smallland, or whether it's just me playing a different game. So stay tuned to find out what on earth happens on Friday. Thank you again for joining me on this little adventure. It was a little bit of a shorter guided tour. At least we finished up Carnivore Island, and next time we are going to be having a look at creatures that were adapted for a more polar environment. So stay safe, everyone. We will see you all soon. Bye bye.